Welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm Dave Rishi, news web editor for blackburnnews.com. At this week's Chatham-Kent Council meeting, Councillor Marjorie Crew introduced a notice of motion that would actually see the banning of door-to-door sales here in the municipality. I've asked Marjorie to join me this week to talk about it. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Now, have you personally been burned by a door-to-door salesperson?
Yes, and Chris brought this up this morning on the radio, asking me if we'd been burned, and yes, we have in the past, and it was difficult to get out of. We had to monitor the end of the contract, and we ended up paying a lot of money over the course of this contract. It was one of the energy sales people where you show them your bill, and we're not vulnerable people. Like, we're pretty smart, we think. And you know, there's other folks that, you know, these people come to their door. The tactics that they engage in are less than friendly. They're intimidating, and they find ways to get into their houses. Depending on what they're selling, they have inflated rates, and they're preying on people in our community who are kind. They don't want to be aggressive and say, just get away from my door, that a lot of people do, you know, get lost, and that's okay to do that. But some people are just too kind, and they see them at the door, and they open the door, and once they're in, and they can be very aggressive and assertive and very intimidating.
Now, I think a big question on a lot of people's minds this morning is who's included in this, because I know personally the people I get hassled from most are religious groups, people bringing around petitions. Are they included in this, or is this strictly sales? This
is strictly sales, Dave. Anything that we license to go door to door, which means that you are either selling a product or a service in exchange for money or a contract. So that's the extent of it. It's not dealing with religious groups that are knocking on your door to talk to you because they're not selling anything. It's not dealing with fundraising campaigns such as Heart and Stroke or the Goodfellows program, things like that, because they're not selling anything. They're allowed to do that door-to-door campaigning without a license.
So this by no means will end door-to-door, I guess, communications, and I don't want to call it soliciting, but I guess, you know, the Girl Guides will still be bringing their cookies around.
Yeah, and there will be some sort of an exemption for Girl Guides and the, you know, the local school fundraisers and things like that. And, you know, these licenses are for non-local businesses. So, for instance, these energy groups could be coming from Toronto or anywhere, and they have to apply for a license to sell in our community. It doesn't apply to local salesmen. So, you know, it's similar to our vendors. If you're a flower vendor and you're local, you don't require that license. But if you're coming from, say, Windsor, and you want to sell here in Chatham-Kent, you need to get a sales license.
Are there other municipalities that have a similar ban?
There's other communities in Canada that have done this. I haven't done all my research on those, but I do know that they do exist. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's, you know, this morning, the thing that really showed up is that as a news story, we had a lot of Twitter feedback, a lot of Facebook feedback. Our website had tons of comments. And a lot of people are bringing up that with Chatham-Kent's unemployment issues, should we be doing this because they see it as taking jobs away from some people? I guess, how do you respond to that?
Well, they're not local jobs that we are looking at, and I understand that these salesmen are, that's their job. However, you know, I want our community to be open to business, but I want our community to be safe. After speaking to licensing, I found out that when these companies come from out of town, and there's only very few that come, they have to have police checks, and there's a whole process that they go through. And they have to, each person that's going door to door has to be police checked. Well, what we find out is that they may have licensed 5 people, but actually they have 10 on the streets. And, you know, there are all these other issues that come with that. As for impacting jobs in Chatham-Kent, it's not impacting anything except for the vulnerable people in our community. who sign onto these contracts not knowing exactly the full extent of what they're signing. And I think that we have an obligation to protect our citizens from people who are not as legitimate as we would like them to be.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining me, Marjorie.
All right.
And thank you once again for joining us for Beyond the Headlines. I'm Dave Rishi with BlackburnNews.com.